Hi, I'm Zelda, and welcome to dropUp, a podcast to inspire young rebels from all backgrounds to pursue their hero's journey. Today I'm having a discussion with Aziz, a Sufi practitioner and dervish. For those who haven't heard of it before, Sufism is a mystical tradition of Islam. Sufis seek to attain a deep spiritual connection with God through practices such as praying, meditation, chanting, and dancing. Being a dervish means practicing your Sufi spirituality through a ritualistic form of dance which consists of whirling. I highly recommend you to check out the link I added in the description to discover Aziz's practice of whirling. It's truly fascinating. But basically, it consists of spinning on a circular motion for a long period of time, seeking a connection to God through this practice. I met Aziz and his wife Anna, who's also a dervish, in their workshop where they teach whirling, and it was a life-changing experience. During this discussion, we talked about Aziz's childhood growing up in a Sufi family, his teenagehood and his quest for his own identity, and we also discussed how to find your own path and commit to it. I wish you a wonderful time listening to us.
Good.
Ready? Almost.
Well, I'll be pouring tea
Okay,
because that's how I
perfect.
talk best. Bismillah.
Aziz, if you were to tell the story of your life, beginning with Once Upon a Time, how would it start? What would we say?
Oh. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Begin in the name of Allah. Once upon a time, actually they say in Arabic, they say it's something like there was and there wasn't in a certain time, in a certain place. But, so, let's see. Once upon a time, we were born into this incarnation and found ourselves in a Sufi family, and I was raised in this heart of love that is Sufism, and with different forms and different practices, but always that heart of love. Bismillah.
Thank you.
And I don't know, we just keep going on this road, and it's life is a journey, and we're just passing through, collecting experience and refining this inner being. And
How did it look like the beginning of this incarnation, your childhood? What kind of child were you?
oh, they said I was very wild.
Oh.
Yes. One of those wild ones.
What did it look like? Do you remember?
I don't remember so much, but I always had people come back and say, "Oh my gosh, you were a crazy one. You came into this circle and you were running and screaming and this and that." So.
And was it welcomed in your family to be wild?
Yeah, I wasn't oppressed so much. So, but, you know, the more I found my roots in this path, I had a container for that wildness to live.
As a child, what do you remember thinking about some things, having some dreams?
I mean, I was always surrounded by this Sufi family is a very universal kind of practice. So I was brought up with every different religion practices, and we kind of so it was all this was familiar to me, whether it was Hinduism or Buddhism or different practices of the seekers. So. I was kind of raised in that universal Sufi context, and had normal childhood, normal for for this. I guess normal in the. I lived in New Mexico mostly in my young childhood. We lived at this spiritual community for a while, Lama Foundation. And in and around New Mexico, so I kind of got this high desert kind of country vibe in my being, and that in the context of the Sufi family. I always felt like I had a very large family because even though I'm only child and this I always felt like I had a big family because we were always surrounded by some sort of community in that sense. Even today, anywhere in the world I go, I'm like, oh, who's in town? Like, travel to faraway places, and I'm hosted in a beautiful Sufi derga somewhere. So there's always a big family.
Talking about teenagehood, often that's a time where we're looking to craft our own identity.
Yes. There's always that you have to.
Yeah.
You have to find your own way. So
What was your experience with that? Were you already feeling one with this lineage? And
no, I mean, as a adolescent and growing up, I was like, it was my weird Sufi parents, and I was trying to fit into the social settings, and then I guess it was I went to I always felt like it didn't quite fit into this sociality of kids and this social context of America. But I really tried. I was like, I want to, fit in, But then, I mean, I even remember crying to my mother. I'm like, I just want to be normal. And then at a certain point, I guess in high school, I realized like, oh, well, actually, I don't need to fit in. And I started hanging out with the punk rockers. And that felt a lot more like easy because I was like, oh, I don't have to conform to somebody else's like cultural context. I can, do this, So that was my I hung out with punk rockers and we did it was like First and Second Gulf War, so we were protesting the war and doing this activism, and always had this kind of this building this radicalism in me. But then also had a group of friends that was we started doing some spiritual exploration. And it was, one of my friends, he was kind of more interested in this than the others, but he kind of pushed the envelope a little bit, and we did some spiritual exploration and kind of took down because we didn't we didn't want to follow any religion or this or that, so we kind of found our own way and kind of recreated the spiritual wheel, so to speak, but it was our wheel, and we did some time of this exploration together, maybe 2-3 years, but it was an important time for me. One of the things we did was we built this temple in Golden Gate Park, we, as kind of a country kid, but we were living in the city, so I was always going to these natural places because I felt more at home. So in Golden Gate Park, it's a very nice, large park, and we found this pile of stones, and we started moving them around.
Wow.
And it took collective energy. Like they were so big, you had to move them together. And so we set up some different areas, and we would go there and do our practice or whatever. And as this group of friends kind of dispersed, like I had kind of made some sort of foundation of like seeking. And at that point I was like, oh well, what am I gonna do next? And I saw the Sufis, and I'm like, oh well, they're kind of teaching along these lines, so I'll go go with them.
Yeah.
So I started going to Zikr, and this is the chanting of the beautiful attributes of the divine reality. Allah, Allah, Allah. And so started going to this and started to find my own self in that path. And our teacher from Konya had come and was teaching the Mev Levi tradition, the Sema, to my family. My mother and stepfather at that point were studying this tradition, and so I would go time to time with them to some events. But then one time in particular, I remember we went to my teacher Jalaluddin Loris Effendi was hosting a zikr in San Francisco. So I heard about it. I'm like, okay, I'll go. And so I go, and I'm like, punk rocker, big long trench coat, big boots, lots of laces. And I go to the door, and there's a big pile of shoes. Everybody's taking their shoes. I'm like, I have way too many laces for that. So I go in with my boots on, and I'm doing the zikr, Allah, Allah, Allah. And he pulls me to turn. So in the zikr, they have the outside circle is making the chanting, and then inside people are coming and turning and whirling. And so I went into this circle. He pulls me. I start turning, and the trench coat lifts up behind me. I'm like, oh, this is cool. Yeah. And from that moment, I was really I was hooked. They had I took the bait and got the hook, and followed this Sema ever since. I was like, this is it. So I journeyed with them up and down the coast, and December they would do for Sheb Arus. It's the wedding night of Jalaluddin Rumi, the day he passed from this world, and they say it's the wedding night because he's married to the beloved in that moment. So in December 17th is the celebration of this passing, and so we would always go and do our Sema and Zikr up and down the coast, West Coast, California, Oregon, Washington, and so I'd follow this caravan, and but I hadn't studied, I hadn't done the training, so I would follow but not join in the traditional ceremony, and I was like, by the third year of this, I was so heartbreaking to not be in the Sema. I was like, if this goes on one more year, really, my heart's gonna break and I'm gonna die. This is it, finished. So that next year, I had followed kind of on the path 3 years, but then that whole next year I was like, okay, I'm gonna go study, and my teacher was living in Hawaii, so I went there, studied with him, came back, long journey, but that whole year studying this Sema, this whirling, and just that. In the end of that year, we went and journeyed to Turkey and to Konya and to the tomb of Mevlana. So it was this really powerful year of study and transmission, and then. That's the beginning, So they put the tall hat, the gravestone on your head, and then you start the journey.
Yeah. I imagine when I'm hearing you sharing this journey, this quest into finding yourself in a way, as if you grew up within a community, a sense of community that's very present in comparison to many other American families,
Right.
probably.
Right.
Um, and then you went on during your teen years and found another community that is the punk rock, and it's interesting to me because I think that rebels at school, they're a very strong community. It's like when you're part of this community of rebels, punk rock, that's also a very strong sense of community that you don't have in other
Right,
other
right. Because
groups.
you have to stick together because
Yeah.
you're
Yes, right.
the minority. You're not in the masses.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, and also like really the Sufis are the punk rock of Islam.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes down to it, they're the radicals. They're
Yeah.
the radical love and the holding the heart of Islam.
Wow.
So, in some ways they are they're the punk rockers of this tradition.
Yeah.
In a way, I
Yeah.
mean, because it's about radical love and radical unity.
And so can you tell us, for anyone listening to this episode and who has never heard of Sufism, what could you tell them to explain Sufism with your own emotions, experience?
Well, like I said, Sufism is kind of the heart of Islam. Like if you take Islam, the religion as a body, the heart is Sufism. And it has all the practices of the religion, but there is this longing and love that's pervading. That's the reason for all these practices. So and it's a journey into the self to find that Allahness, that divine unity. They say that Allah cannot be contained in anything, but it can be contained in the heart of the lover. So we strive to be in this unity. And there's one phrase that's probably the most important phrase in this path is La ilaha illallah. There is nothing, and even that nothingness is Allah. So it's like it's this complete unity of being, and that being is Allah. So you take everything, and it's so great, so vast. You have no way to conceive of it in your mind. So it's like, but you can conceive of it in the heart. You can find this connection, this rabata with love, because love is the all-pervading essence. That it's like the universal glue. It holds everything together. Without love, there wouldn't be any of this. I mean, it was all born in love. It's this, Allah was a hidden treasure, longing to be known. And so this manifestation of humanity came to be a reflection for Allah, to know Allahness. And we have the potential to do the most beautiful things and the worst things. It's like we have the remote control. We can choose any channel.
When you found yourself in this path that you just mentioned previously, starting to study, did you feel like you found your path? Were you asking yourself, this is something that's very common in my generation, but I think in any generation at a young adult age, asking yourself, what's your path? Did it feel like you were on the right track?
It was less like, I found my path, I found my guru, I found this. It was more like, this love and longing pulled me on the path. You know, it was like, oh, I'm in love with this, whatever this is. There's something in there for me, you know, with it, this turning. It's like, oh, I could get this ecstasy from it, and that itself pulled me on the path. And you know, then you keep going.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's taken different you go by different scenery on the road, but the roads are all going to the same place. I mean, doesn't matter what path it is, you know, all the roads go to the same place. You know, whether, you know, everybody's like, oh, well, you know, is this my path or is this my path? It's like, it's less important what the path is and more that you just go on it. The trouble I see with, you know, modern spiritual culture is that there's so many roads and so many available paths that people are like, oh, I'll take a little bit of this and I'll take a little bit of that, and they never go anywhere because they're just like taste testing at the spiritual salad bar. Especially in the Western culture where you have like, and you know, you're like, oh, I want to kind of seek, you want to find something, but there's so much available that you know, oh, I'll try this, and then oh, it gets kind of hard or something like that, you know, like, oh, this yoga, it's like on my back, I don't know, so I'll try that Buddhism thing, and you're sitting, and then they hit you with a stick, and you're like, what's this? I'll go over to the, you know, the Tantra Shmantra, and like, you know, anyways, so you have this kind of hopping between spiritual roads, and you end up not going very far because it's like when it gets hard, you jump off. Well, I'll try this other one. But you know, so it's less important the road because all the roads are going the same place. They're climbing the same mountain to that, you know, that unity. You know, they're all paths that lead to that unity of being. It's just different ways of finding it. So.
Do you have tips for people having a hard time to commit? Because I think whether it's a spiritual practice, a professional path, or even a romantic partner, lots of people in this modern world, as you described, have a hard time committing to any of those things. Do you have any advice or thoughts for them?
Well, it's without commitment, you don't stick to the road, so to speak. So whether it's in love or whether it's in, you know, your spiritual journey, without this giving of yourself, then there's no traction. There's no easy to, oh, this other road looks easier. Yeah. This other partner looks more beautiful. This, you know, like, so, yeah, it's, but, you know, it takes being in love to commit. So until you find your love in it, then there's no point in committing. If you don't fall in love, what's the point of getting married?
Yeah.
So first find the love. The love will take you the rest of the way. Because once you catch the love, you're like, oh, that's the taste. That's it.
And maybe to add on to that, to be aware of what love looks like. I mean, what I mean by that is when you fall in love, don't forget to recognize that it's what's happening. Maybe, yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, love's love. Like, there's infatuation, which isn't quite love, but it's kind of like love, and easily confused with love.
Mm-hmm.
But when you found love, it's there's no comparison. I mean, there's no like you can't argue with it.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, this is
Yeah.
you know, whether you fall in love with your intimate partner, or whether you fall in love with a teacher, or whether you fall in love with this this essence of the path that you're following, some practice on it, and that love will take you on the journey.
Yeah.
There's no point in following if there's no love.
Yeah.
Then it's just like you're doing your Muslim push-ups or something.
We're surrounded by instruments, and I know that you studied woodworking.
Yes,
and
yes.
so I wonder, did you make any of those instruments?
No. I actually went to Turkey at one point to study instrument making. And I've had a few teachers and this and that, but the Turkish style of teaching is like really like you have to put in 10 years just like serving tea and lighting cigarettes, and then they teach you some little tricks.
Yeah.
And it didn't really fit into my time frame. I mean, maybe I was just too impatient, but so I my trainings in as far as woodworking is in fine furniture, and I've done everything in woodworking. A little bit of instrument making. I made one of this rhubarb here. That was part of my apprenticeship there. But like as far as these instruments, no. This is known as the string palace, otherwise known as the house for wayward saws. But Gary, my dear friend, and he takes care of these instruments, and they find a home and get played eventually. But yeah, he repairs and takes care of instruments.
When did you study woodworking, and do you fell in love with this practice?
Yes, I went to art high school and did a lot of different mediums and kind of burnt out on all of them. Then I guess after I was coming out of high school, and I found woodworking, and I did a few projects. I was working with a friend of mine, and I was like, oh, this is, it's a beautiful medium. And it was like, I kind of found okay, this is my medium. And I started following that road and that road of mastery in craft. And yes, it was in love and passion for this work. And I mean, I've worked in the trade so long that maybe it's more, an old marriage that you're it's comfortable, you know how to do it, but it's maybe some of the passion isn't quite there anymore. I have to find it again if I'm going to. But it's also why I never wanted to do this. I kept woodworking as my trade and where I made my living, and kept my practice of Sama and spirituality as my passion. So because it's something you do as a trade, you do too many things you don't necessarily I always used to say I like trees more than most furniture I see.
Right. And so what does a day in your life right now look like? And can you tell us more about what I think is your main Sama practice, that is whirling?
a day in my life, well, hopefully none of them are the same, because
Yeah.
if you do the same thing over and over again, it's so I try to keep things new and fresh, and I'm trying to enjoy life and live life rather than work to live life. I mean, if that makes sense. Like, it's so easy to get caught in the materialism and especially in the West, in this capitalist culture. Like, so many people are just trying to survive and working every day, like, just to hold up their car payments and house payments and this and that. So I'm trying to being stuck in that for many years. I'm trying to do things differently and do things more for living life and experience, rather than just to make money or do this. But we all have to survive. So there's a balance.
Right.
So I try to work some. I try to do some practice, group practice, music, doing some this. Ever since my father, Mev Levi passed, he gave me a mission, and I kind of have to follow that. So I'm looking on how to fulfill this mission and doing more teaching of this practice, and following this journey. So the other part of your question was what?
The whirling practice. I think that most people might not have heard of it, and for the ones who did, maybe they don't know much about it. So could you tell us a little about that practice?
So the form of whirling that we practice stems from the time of Jalaluddin Rumi, where they would play music and whirl in ecstasy and spinning around themselves and spinning around the heart, and looking for that unity in this movement. Some of it has to do with this movement being a very universal movement. It's like everything in the universe is spinning in some fashion, whether it's the planets or the galaxies or the electrons around the atom. There's this spinning, and so we imitate this movement to find the unity in the universe and to find the unity in our own being. And it was formalized by the descendants of Mevlana Jalaluddin Rumi into the Sema-Ayin, which is a very formalized practice and has a lot of metaphor wrapped into it. The black robe, it represents the body or the death shroud. The tall hat's the gravestone. And it's like this death of the ego, the death of this I don't want to say negative aspects, but the death of that is not unity, that which is held separate. So in the beginning we take off this robe and we're standing in this body of light, this white robes, and we whirl in this light body, and it's like whirling in this angelic body. You set your physical body aside and you whirl in these angelic realms and bring this connection from heaven to earth through the human heart. And there's several stages of music and different parts of the Sema-Ayin, which have different meanings. And in the end, you sit and this robe is put back on you. You don't lose it, but you get to experience this other world, because we think this is the world and we're doing this and that and you're you and I'm me, but there's another world where we're all drops in the ocean of love, and so we get to experience that world and then come back and do the work in this world. So that's a little bit about the Sema. It's Sema means listening. And so what are we listening to? We're listening into the heart. We're listening to that angelic music that began this humanity. And we're seeking for that which connects all of us. And we lose the features of you and me, and we become this one body, this one breath, and enter into that experience of La ilaha illallah, that there is only one breath, there is only one reality. And so that's the intention, and we strive on that road to find that place of truth, haq.
When you're not practicing your sama, your whirling, you travel quite a bit, I think, and I know that you were touring with Fana Fialla. You mentioned in the beginning of this conversation that everywhere you go, you find community, even in faraway places.
Yes.
Can you tell us a bit about this experience?
Well, I mean, this traveling that I'm doing with Fanafi Allah, it's also like this Sufi work. I mean, they're playing this music, and I get to whirl in it. I mean, and it's all this connection of hearts, because this, the Qawwali music is sung poetry from mystic saints, and in praise of these great ones, these saints on the path, these realized ones. It brings out another level of connection, and then this, these. In any context of this, the musicians are singing their hearts. They're opening their hearts for some divine energy to come through. And the dervishes are doing the same thing in movement, opening their hearts and letting something come through. So we all connect heart to heart, and then we connect with everybody who's sitting with us, heart to heart. And then all these hearts, they connect, and we all go together into some experience that's beyond us. And this journey's taken me around the world and taken me to different places, and we find different homes here and there of these, because one of the main aspects of Sufism is hospitality and service. And so we're welcomed into these Sufi homes and served beautifully in this. And when we're at our home, we do the same. We open our home and our heart and serve people with food, with music, with this zikr, with this experience.
Beautiful. I am in my 20s, early 20s, and as a way to conclude this conversation, I would like to ask you what kind of advice, we touched on this a bit earlier, but what kind of advices you would give to someone from my generation that's seeking their path, looking for a way to orient themselves in this world?
Fall in love. Because it's love that's gonna take you there. We can doesn't, if there's so many options. It's what's inside you. Like we have to, the mind's not very good at loving. It's not what its job is. Its job's to go and get food and make the some business. So fall in love and follow that one and let the mind, do its work.
Yeah.
But don't let it dictate what your heart needs.
Thank you, Aziz.
Inshallah, that can help on this journey, and for whoever hears this, most important is fall in love and follow your heart in anything, in any practice, whether it's the spiritual journey or what you're going to gain your sustenance from. Most important is that you love it.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Yes.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. I was really touched by Aziz's final words on falling in love, and this is what I wish to you all. Until then, please subscribe to the podcast, drop up, leave some reviews. You can also send me some messages about what you thought about the episode at Zelda Poem on social media. See you soon for more content for young hackers, founders, and unconventional beings on how to navigate life.